maybe look up from a screen, blink a few times. So let's get back into it. I do apologise. I realise that we are behind schedule, but we will finish within the calendar time that we have. It's just the times on the agenda no longer apply. So we are going to carry on. I'm really delighted that we're going to be talking next about our tobacco strategy, and I'm going to invite Jennifer to open us up, and then we'll take it from there. So over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Yes, and I've invited some colleagues to join us for the next two items who've been very much more close to this work, and will be able to answer any particular questions that you have. So this first item is about our Highland tobacco control strategy. So I think we're all pretty familiar with the fact that smoking remains probably one of the most, significant modifiable risk factors for a number of conditions, and also in terms of mortality. And and it references it in the paper, whilst overall, when we just look at average numbers or percentages of the population who are smoking, that's in decline. I think it's quite stark when you start then looking into what the difference is by areas of deprivation, and that, the difference goes from 6% to 26%, which is, not insignificant. And that is also, you'll see that in terms of smoking attributable deaths. So this is a strategy that's been developed in partnership. It's the second of its ilk. And it reflects really and builds on the work that's been done through partnership over a number of years. And you'll see that from within the structure of the strategy, it looks at it in terms of people, place and product, which is in line with the Scottish Government framework. And so it takes us through the various actions that the partnerships have been doing, but also what they're now looking to do to build on it. And I guess the important thing for us as a board to recognise, it's a revised strategy. There is no actual requirement for us from national to have a strategy, but as a public health function, we recognise the vital work of being able to identify what the right actions are that we take. So it's building on that, bringing partnerships together in order to drive the outcomes that we're seeking. But it's not a static document. So whilst it has a time frame around it, there is recognition that there are some elements that we may want to adapt to, because I think the one area that often catches people's eye is the vaping industry and how that significantly changed the landscape. And so it requires us to be adaptive in that space. But I'll bring Susan Burse in, who is the author of the report and who's been working very closely on this, just to add any other points that you particularly, that Susan, you want to make sure that the board understand and hear.
Thank you, Jennifer. You've outlined most of what I would have said anyway, so that was really, really useful. I don't think there's much really to add, just that the strategy is evidence-based, it's inequality focused, and as Jennifer has said, it's adaptable. So the plan would be that the action plan itself is a fluid document that will be reviewed on a quarterly basis. Updates will be provided via operational SLTs if that's appropriate, depending on what action we're reporting on, and an annual report will go to the Population Programme Board. And the aims are to reduce tobacco-related harm and support the smoke-free generation by 2034, which of course means a smoking prevalence of 5% or less within the adult population across all communities in Scotland. So we're nearly there for, as Jennifer said, the least deprived, but when we're looking at the most deprived, it's sitting at 26%, so a significant amount of work to do there.
Thank you, and thanks for coming along, Susan. That's much appreciated. Okay, I've got a few things, but I'll open up for comments and questions around the tobacco strategy. Sorry, my screen's frozen. Give me a second. Okay, that's better. Right. Great. I've got Alex first and then Muriel. So Alec, I'll bring you in first. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, strategy-wise, I've no problem at all. I think it's good. I fully support it. The only question I've got is the smoke-free place. The fact that we are now smoke-free in the hospital areas and all grounds. Now, having been to Rigmore quite a lot recently, at least they're not smoking at the door anymore, but they are still smoking away from it. And a couple of times I have said as I've walked past them, you do realise you can't smoke here. And they kind of looked at me, and only my size saved me, basically. But it's unfair on staff who we're expecting to do that, I would suspect. Otherwise, how are we going to police the smoke-free in the grounds bit? So, it's good that it's there. It's good that there's notices up. As I say, at least they're moving away from the front door, but there are people still smoking on the grounds, and I don't really know how we enforce that. So that's the comment. Thank you.
Do you want me to come in there, Sarah? Thanks, Alex. And yeah, absolutely recognise that, and we recognise that Scotland-wide as well. It's really problematic. One thing we've started doing in Rigmore is every time a patient comes in now, they're asked if they smoke, and if they do smoke, they're advised that an advisor will come along and speak to them just to find out if they want support to stop smoking or if they just need support to manage the withdrawals while they're in hospital. So that's a pilot that's started probably about end of May, and we're making some headway. We're hoping that that will help a bit, because obviously when the advisor goes to speak to the patient, they're told that they can't smoke while they're in hospital. So do you want nicotine replacement therapy to manage withdrawals? So it's not a forced quit, and it's not asking a patient if they want to see an advisor. It's letting them know that an advisor will come along and speak to them, and that's just taking a bit of the pressure off the nursing staff or whatever staff are admitting the patient as well. But there's no one magic wand. It's a lot of different things need to happen.
Thanks, Susan. I wonder, apologies, Muriel, I wonder if I can just interject, because I've got a question that relates. And I was going to almost broaden that out a little bit, building on Alex's point. I can't remember what page I saw it on, so apologies. But there was a portion of it where it talked about, not just our estates, but actually working with partners that we're connected with, and sort of asking them, maybe that's not the right word, but sort of pushing that out so that it's not just our buildings that we're talking about making smoke-free places, it's our partner buildings as well. And I suppose my question or my thought is, as we move forward, will we have some increased levers around that? So if we think about where, and maybe this is even a question for Richard actually, where we're thinking about sharing estates, where we're thinking about shared spaces, hubs, whatever they might be, I don't know. Is there an ability through that process to say, actually one of our requirements is that this is an entirely smoke-free zone, or whatever we want to call it? So I'm not sure who's best to pick that question up, but that's it.
I can start the conversation off, Sarah, if you like. So from the public health perspective, it would just be about supporting partners in revising and developing policies around smoke-free places. We'd also be looking at the Scottish Government to come in there as well. So they are looking at smoke-free children's spaces, for example, play parks. And we've had a lot of reports recently from schools that there are pupils actually vaping in the classroom, and the teachers feel unable to stop that. So there's a lot of resources and support we can provide, and a lot of training as well. But obviously we can't enforce everything. But yeah, that's where our place would be. So it's not just tobacco we're talking about anymore, it's vaping. And of course it's a policy, isn't it, rather than legislation, because the legislation only is in the hospital and it only covers tobacco, not vaping.
Okay, that's interesting. Gareth and Richard, you've both got your hands up. Gareth, I'll maybe bring you in first.
Probably just a nod to the fact that as we develop our new board strategy, we'll need to be thinking about this in a slightly different way. I think going forwards, smoking cessation and so on is absolutely part of. I think Susan made the point, there's multiple things we need to be doing. But again, not for wider discussion here necessarily today, but the fact that big tobacco companies pivoted very quickly to vaping, what are we doing to work with industry? I think that's a conversation we've had elsewhere. So there's probably a mindset shift we all need to think about in terms of the prevention part of it. Because once somebody's started, then I think we're into the cessation part of it. But I suppose it comes back to the least and the most deprived. What are the factors that are really contributing to people picking up and starting to smoke or vape in those areas? How can we work with them? How can we work with other partners? Because that's going to be beyond our boundaries as a health and care provider, but certainly we should be working with others. So lots to think about.
No, it's a great point. Thank you, Gareth. And Richard.
Yeah, thanks. It's something we've spoken about at the Highland Property Group. We're looking at setting up a shared property lease agreement so that all the public sector can use this single agreement to co-locate in each other's buildings. And we did speak about that specific type of thing where I think what Susan was saying, NHS are the only organisation that have smoking banned on the grounds. It's policy for most other organisations. So it's something we're looking to build into individuals, into this generic lease. We're looking to build in individual organisation asks. For example, SNH might have some asks about travel that we'll build in there as well. So it's something we're aware of and something we look at on an individual basis is when we're co-locating in each other's buildings.
Okay, thank you. Apologies, Muriel, I'll bring you in now.
No, thank you. It's given me another point I want to follow on from that, Sarah. Thank you. I think this is an opportunity for public health working with our other bodies, whether it be council, High Life Highland, or whatever the sector it is in public health, police, ambulance service, because we have got staff there that need support as well. It's not just the public, and I think it's an opportunity. I do like the strategy. It's just the reach. One thing I do wonder if we have got access or can find of digital creativity and reaching young people, because vaping in our schools is becoming more fashionable. A lot of young boys are doing it. A lot of young girls are doing it because they see it on TikTok, a platform I'm not on, but I do understand it's out there. But I think we can, for instance, an example, in Highland Council, we work with environmental health colleagues, so we can get in and test for people that are mis-selling products to young people. So I wonder, again, it's that collaboration, hopefully under Jennifer's lead, that we could maybe get there. But I do think we also need to get the messaging right just for our young people as well. Vaping is not a fashion accessory, it's a risk, and get there. Thank you.
Do you want me to come back there at all, Sarah?
Yes, if you could. Great, Susan.
Thank you, Muriel. That's really, really useful. So we're working with our community partnerships around some of this, and of course the Planet Youth programme as well. So there's 13 schools now signed up to that, and the surveys are out just now for all third year and fourth year. So we'll probably get a lot of rich data back from there, and then move forward from that. And obviously there's the whole family wellbeing as well that we're working with. So yes, very keen to work with partners.
Okay, good. Thank you, Susan. Okay, any other questions or comments with regards to the tobacco strategy? Just checking I've got all mine. Jerry, please.
I was really struck by, I think it's on page 279 of the pack, the disparity in the prevalence of smoking rates. That really struck me, and I don't know why I had been blind to that. 26% down to 6% is really enormous. So that got me thinking about the action plan, which I do like the action plan, but I was thinking, is the action plan going to, if we're to achieve what we want to achieve, is there a way of making it more targeted at SIMD 1 and 2, or are we dependent upon active engagement from those quartiles in order to achieve that? Because there must be a reason. I don't know what the previous prevalence figures would have been, what 26 used to be and what 6 used to be, and I just wonder if there's some more targeted intervention we could be doing, or actually the interventions are very sound. We just need to make sure we get them to the right communities, as it were. Thank you.
Yes, Jerry, I think there's more that we can do, but we do have a targeted approach to areas of deprivation, and we work closer with the community pharmacies in those areas as well, because they're well placed for people with more sort of chaotic lifestyles and they can't keep appointments. So the community pharmacy is just a drop-in session, so we work very, very closely with them. And what we found is if somebody from an area of deprivation sets a quit date, they're as likely to be successful in stopping smoking than somebody that's from a least deprived area. So that's really quite encouraging as well.
And Jennifer, did you want to come in as well?
Yeah, and I think also what's really interesting is in recognising that disparity, the target that we then are monitored against is successful quit at 12 weeks in those 40% most deprived, which I think is really helpful, because in working in other systems, that isn't the approach that other nations have taken. They've been very much about achieving successful quits. And the fact that this is a 12-week quit is also really helpful, because in other nations, it tends to just look at the 6 weeks. So, you know, it is that behavioural approach. But I think the piece that Gareth referenced earlier and what Susan's been talking to is what we don't want to do is to be picking up the pieces once somebody's already started. So how do we then think about how are we working? So that work in schools, for example, to try and shift the dial on this being a fashion accessory in a way of that our peers are seen to be behaving. How do we get into some, you know, how do we think about the resource that we've got and targeting that more in areas that we believe are most likely to be the areas where people are going to start engaging with this? So it's multifaceted. So I think you're right there, Jerry, that the interventions are sound, but it is as much as anything about how we make sure that we deliver on those in a way that the people that we most need to engage with are engaged in the areas that they need to be engaged. And that also, very importantly, we continue to keep an eye on it from an inequality lens. So being able to measure that differential is really important, because it does draw us into the conversations just as we've just had.
Absolutely. And I suppose picking up that exact point and the point that Gareth made earlier, so I also found that really, really helpful, you know, looking at it at a top level, but then understanding the differences when we look at it through an inequalities lens. And I think the fact that this strategy has been written through that lens is really, really helpful. And wherever possible, I would really like to see more of our work being sort of presented in that way, because quite often, it's particularly at board level, when we're looking at very high level stats, it's hard to be able to understand those differences. So I think taking that inequalities approach is really, really helpful. And you're right, Gareth, I think we think about how do we take that into the work that we're embarking on around refreshing our strategy and all the bits that will sit underneath that, is that if we can do as much of that as possible through that health inequalities lens, I think that'll really make us think about this differently and target things where we need to target them. So I really appreciated that approach. And everybody's put their hand up now. Jerry, were you coming back in on that?
It wasn't on that. I just had one final comment to say, just to say how delighted I was that the EQIA was attached to it as well.
I was going to say that as well. Yeah, yeah, that was lovely. More of that. That was great. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'll bring in some others as well. Karen, I'll bring you in next, please.
Guess what I'm going to say? I love the EQIA. More power to them. I love the comprehensiveness of it, and I think it is absolutely the way that we should be approaching much more of our work. What I would love to see is how that the building blocks between that and the KPIs, and how we can kind of draw those lines through. So yeah, I thought the EQIA really underpinned the strategy in an absolutely perfect way. So thank you very much for that. Much appreciated.
Actually, I'm gonna give us an action. I think we add an action for our work. So because we have talked about this in other areas in development time, etc., about how do we get better visibility around EQIAs, and maybe there's an action for us to take that away and actually think about how we might replicate that elsewhere. So we can pick that up offline and think about what works and what doesn't work in terms of board level papers and what we want to see in EQIAs. And maybe that's something, Jennifer, we could pick that up, and others, we can have a discussion about that. Okay, great. Steve, I'll bring you in next, please.
Thanks, Sarah. And yeah, I think this is great. My dad was a 40-a-day smoker, and I remember sitting in the car with him when I was younger. So, you know, anyway. So, yeah, it's just a thought from me. I mean, I think it's really good, and obviously the evidence is there, but it does focus on stopping smoking, and I kind of, there's a so what for me that's maybe missing. I think so. You stop smoking, then what? You know what? You know, how does your lifestyle change, and what are the positives, and how can we help people not go back to it, and what is the pathways or the various pathways we could help them move on to, irrespective of you know, whether SMD1 or not. And I think there is potentially a link to the Active Highland strategy here that we could make in terms of getting people more active more often. And if we can make that link, and our public health colleagues can tie that into the Active Highland strategy, and we can drive that forward in the community planning partnership, then I think that would really help in terms of the long-term benefits that people would generate from stopping smoking. So it's just a request, if we can think about that as we take this strategy forward, and in particular the action plan on the people side. Thanks.
Oh, that's a great point. Thanks, Steve. Susan, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just really briefly, I think that's a really good point, Steve. And we do, when we're going through the process with the client, it's a 14-week program. The majority of the time, sometimes it can go on for much longer. It just depends how much support. But we do put things in place for whatever suits them. So it could be around membership at High Life Highland, for example. I think there's also another opportunity, though, and I think it's a good time to reflect about some of the longer term benefits. So we do a follow-up at 12 months to all our clients. So there's maybe some questions that we could ask during that follow-up about signposting on and finding out what differences has been made to their lifestyle, rather than just asking, have you remained stop smoking at 12 months? If you haven't, do you want to come back into the service?
That's a great idea, actually, isn't it? And using that contact to not just tick the one box, but to tick the whole person box as well. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Okay, good. Alex, I'll bring you in, please.
Just building on the point that Gareth made about the industry, and particularly vaping, and how you're set up for it. The strategy doesn't touch on this, but to me, I think it's generally accepted now that vaping as a start, you know, not vaping to stop smoking, but kids vaping that have never smoked, it's like the entry level that in the 70s and 80s cannabis was seen for other hard drugs, or moving into hard drugs. Is this an approach that can be used in the schools to say, look, you know, that's still nicotine. It's still bad for you, even though it's supposed to help stop smoking. To my mind, what's worrying is it's actually helping them start smoking when they're using it. And is that something that the strategy needs to reflect a bit more? Thanks.
Yeah, we can certainly make more stronger actions within the action plan around that, because we are doing a lot of work in schools, and we are pointing out that it's, although it might be seen as being safer than starting to smoke, it's still not safe at all. And we open our service to people who now want to stop vaping. I think we're probably the only board in Scotland that do that just now. And we've seen quite an influx of people coming through the service that want to stop vaping. So yeah, it's got past the stage where it's just been used as an aid to stop smoking. It is, people are starting it. So we need to be ahead of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. Thank you. That was a really helpful conversation. I think I'm really glad that we went around with that and got the various thoughts out. Sorry, my screen has frozen. Oh, there we go. I'm just checking what we were being asked to do with it at board. So we were being asked to consider and agree the actions for delivery in 2025 to 2030 and take substantial assurance around the NHS Highland tobacco strategy. Are we content with that? Great. Lovely. And thank you for coming along, Susan. It's much appreciated. I'm going to move us on now to item number 9. This is our Child Poverty Action Plan update. And I've got Jennifer and Evan to speak, so I don't know who's taking it first, but I shall hand over for that item. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. I've got my colleague here as well, who's been working on the Highland plan. So if there are any particular questions or points to raise, then she'll also be able to be around. And then I think Evan will also want to speak to the Argyll and Bute one. I guess, I don't need to tell anybody in this room that child poverty is one of the 4 key national priorities, quite rightly. And I would say that Scotland is leading the way in terms of how it's actually taking purposeful action to drive that down, which is to be applauded. I mean, what the emerging data is telling us is that in order to hit the target that was set, which is to by 2030-31 to reduce the proportion of children in relative poverty to 10%. Currently it's at 18%. There would be a need to lift 100,000 children and families out of poverty. So, whilst there's been a lot of great work, I think there's just a recognition of the challenge that still remains. And it is interesting, I think, when looking at the plans, both Argyll and Bute and Highland, how the patterning of poverty for an area that is very rural and remote. And I think the things that really struck me through those things are to do with elements like fuel poverty, which would be expecting the overall increased cost of day-to-day living and products because of rurality and the additional costs. But also, I think important for us as we move forward with our organisational strategy is in-work poverty and how significant that is. And therefore, it talks very much to our anchor strategy, which we're already cognizant of. So I think that they're an important one to just bring in, really. It's structured, as you'll see, around the 3 areas of sort of getting started, growing up and moving on. And whilst this plan is reflecting work to this date, so it's done that look back, but also articulating the actions that we intend to take over this coming financial year for the Highland plan in particular. The plans in terms of revising that and refreshing it are also already being started and based on some work that's been done around looking at the need to strengthen the lived experience piece, needing more data informed. So it's been interesting, the conversation we've just had about the importance of data and how that helps you get into different conversations, needing to develop our understanding in terms of current needs. And I think that, and also the wider elements that play into poverty around housing, around transport. But I think what's also interesting across both these areas is that there are poverty panels, poverty alliance and poverty commissions in place. And for me, therefore, as I was left, reading through all of this and reminding myself of all the good work and the challenge in front of us, is there feels like an opportunity maybe to bring some of that learning and what emerges out of that back at some point to really think about how we consider it as part of our organisational strategy. But anyway, I will now hand it over to colleagues, and I don't know whether Cathy Steer, who's joined, whether there's anything additional that you'd want to add in, and then obviously also Evan to speak about all the work that in the Argyll and Bute plan.
Thanks, Jennifer. I think you've covered most of it there. Maybe just to add that NHS boards have had a particular ask this year around child poverty reports, and we are particularly being asked to prioritise 4 areas. And those are around leadership and accountability, staff training, our role as an anchor organisation, which Jennifer has mentioned, but particularly with a focus on parental employment and what we're doing around parental employment. And the final one is around how we use our power in terms of procurement and income maximisation to support the activity and the priorities around child poverty. So just to give assurance to the board that the actions within the Highland plan has given some cognizance to those particular asks from Scottish Government for NHS boards, and that we have included actions that will support NHS Highland to deliver on those priority areas as well.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, I suppose just when you were talking there, that described how broad it goes, which is absolutely right. Evan, did you want to come in and say a bit about Argyll and Bute before I open up for questions?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, happy to. So obviously we have our child poverty work ongoing in Argyll and Bute as well. As an integration authority, we're required to report on that work, and I chair the Child Poverty Action Group as chief officer, and that's a partnership across the council and the third sector and the NHS. So our plan focuses around those three main drivers of child poverty, or rather reducing child poverty. So tackling income through employment, income from benefits, and challenges around the cost of living, as well as that kind of underlying layer of tackling directly the impacts of poverty. Not included in your papers is a child-friendly version of this plan as well, and I think you probably all kind of recognize there's just such a whole host of work that goes on across this wide agenda. There's so many different touch points that impact on child poverty. And I'm happy to have this circulated afterwards, but the child-friendly version is actually, surprise, surprise, a really digestible way of seeing a lot of that work and the way it all fits in across those key themes, whether it be through the Parental Employability Support Fund to support parents into skills and jobs, supporting people's access to benefits, or supporting kind of with the cost of living through, for instance, the educational maintenance allowance for people in full-time education. So there's a whole range of inputs that go into this overall plan. And there's also kind of a specific island component within the Argyll and Bute action plan that obviously is a big issue for us within Argyll and Bute. So yeah, really kind of exciting work. There's obviously so much more to do, and it remains a priority.
Thank you, Evan. And just to touch on that kind of breadth, we also spoke not directly about this paper, but spoke about this at a recent community planning partnership board meeting. Elements of this, the whole family thing, the Highland Council's Poverty Commission, as you've touched on, Jennifer. So yeah, there's something, isn't there, about recognising the breadth of this, not just for our own organisation, but across partner organisations as well. Okay, going to open up for questions and comments around the Child Poverty Action Plan update. And just as a reminder, we are being asked to consider and note the actions that have been carried out, but also to agree the actions that are for delivery for 2025-26 as well. So a backward look and a forward look there. Karen, I'll bring you in, please.
Thank you. I mean, it's such a significant amount of stuff, isn't it? The whole, you know, if we could do this and nothing else for like 5 years, wouldn't that be great? We just park everybody else in a time machine for 5 years, sort this out, and then we might get a chance. But I had a very specific question or a comment, really. I don't know if it's a question. Is that in Evan, in your paper around data and child poverty, that bit around the data governance challenge, where we can't get the information we need to help people because it's sitting in a locked box somewhere, and that just seems so mad.
Yep, go on, Evan.
In fact, I'm gonna. I've just realised Mandy is on the line. So Mandy is our service improvement officer who works very closely with this agenda and has done a lot of the work. Sorry, Mandy, I didn't realise you were there. But so I'm going to pass to Mandy to deal with that question. You can do much more eloquently and in detail than I.
Thanks. Yeah, Karen, just to say that is recognised as one of the biggest problems with tackling child poverty. How do we target and focus on the people that are either not claiming or missing out in some way? And Fergus Walker, our benefits manager, and David Murdoch, our data analyst, they are working on that along with myself and others, and the improvement service and an organisation called Savvy, which is some convoluted name, but progress is being made and targeting is able to happen. But you're right that the issue still remains unlocking data, and the request is going to be made to DWP specifically about that, but also getting those legal gateways. And there is work directly with Scottish Government about that at the moment. So we're hoping for some real progress in the next few months. But at the moment, that as we can identify, but not target down to the postcode level, would just wouldn't be legally able.
Thank you, Mandy. Okay, I just to pick up, Evan, you touched there on the sort of the child-friendly version, and I didn't realise that existed, but I'm very pleased to hear that it does. And I wonder, not for this year, but perhaps when we see future iterations of these reports, because I think touching on what we've said, because it is so broad and there is such a kind of a wide range of action and for ourselves and with our partners, I was thinking myself when I read it, actually it'd be really helpful if there was some kind of front page which gives a very short, snappy overview of where we are, and then obviously we need the detail that sits behind it as well. Just because I found myself as I was reading through it, I was so kind of engrossed in the detail, and when I got to the end, I couldn't quite remember where we were with everything, and whether we take that in the future as an appendix of the child's version or some other kind of I know it's overused, but some kind of rag something or other, so we can see an overview and then dive deeper. I think that would be really helpful, just because of the breadth of it all.
Can I just mention,
yeah.
Sarah, the child-friendly version is a graphic version, a plan on a page, and what we've done, it's an update of the previous one that you might have seen, but we've got a group of children, Youth Voice largely, to work to co-produce with a graphic artist, and they have had the choice. They've looked at the plan and what's going on, and they have had the choice of what goes in there. So for me, it's doubly useful, that approach, because you can not only see a lot of what's going on, but exactly what the children prioritize. So I'd say that's a better approach than a front sheet.
That's really helpful. I think that actually might be in there. I do remember I did see a page, like a graphic-y page. So that might be in there. So that's really, really good. So that's helpful to understand that was the methodology for creating that. And I think I might look at it again with that intelligence, because actually you're right. It summarizes it for us, but it actually tells us what is important to the children. Okay, no, that's good. Great. Alistair, I can see you've got your hand up, so I'll bring you in, please.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Of course, the government agencies and the statutory authorities already have the information that could address child poverty overnight, and it goes back to the point that Mandy touched on about data sharing. For instance, councils know everybody that's entitled to free school meals. They know everyone that gets the educational maintenance allowance. They know everyone that gets the clothing allowance. HMRC knows everybody's earnings in terms of pay. And of course, the Scottish Security Benefit System in Scotland and the DWP in England for benefits that have not yet migrated also know everyone's benefit situation. So I think one needs to pretend not to be too cynical about this and say, well, if all the information is known by various statutory agencies, why do we need to wait, as Karen suggests, 5 years to actually address it? And I think maybe we could make some representations through the chairs group, Sarah, that you're on, to see if we can get some loosening up of the data sharing between the statutory agencies, the local authorities, that could enable a quicker and faster response to do this. I know the Highland Council's been trying to do this for a while, and I think has recently made a minor breakthrough with getting some data sharing agreed. I think the other thing worth bearing in mind in terms of our health board is that I believe we are the only health board in Scotland that actually has a resident citizens advice bureau within the board's area, based at Regmore Hospital, and it might be useful if some promotion of that was done by the health board to actually point out to people there is one there. It is well used, but I think it's probably not known by many staff that there is one there, and maybe linking these dots up for poverty might be very useful. And I think it's at times of life-changing situations when somebody is admitted to hospital with a life-changing event that they should be spoken to and signposted on at that point for benefits. When a mother has a baby, there should be something in there pointing her to various citizens advice bureaus or information or other providers that can actually help get the best start for them. So I think there's a lot we can do as a board that joins things up, that whilst each one might seem small, collectively and together they will make a significant difference. And I'm more than happy to speak to any health board staff that might be interested in finding out more about how that can be done from a citizens advice perspective. Thanks.
Thanks, Alistair. Those are some really great suggestions. And that's also just triggered a memory. I know, and I'll pose this as a question. We have within the health board the Money Matters initiative and training, but how far does that go? Picking up Alistair's suggestion, and particularly the one, you said there, Alistair, if we have the opportunity to engage with people, are we taking those opportunities to have the conversation and to support them to understand what's available? So that's a bit of a question. Does Money Matters do that, or do we need to build on that? But I can see I've got a couple of people that are maybe coming in response. So I've got Gareth and then Kathy. So Gareth, I'll bring you in, please.
Not so much in response. I'm thoughtful about what I'm listening to. So, and again, it's not necessarily my remit. It's just a thought that comes to mind around. We talk about income maximisation and benefits kind of maximisation, if you like. And I wondered whether, and I think the focus is around how getting people parents into employment. And there seems to be something in the middle, maybe that Venn diagram overlap. Is there a group of the population that is also unwell, so is in that benefits, in that kind of trap in the middle of on benefits, can't work? And I think it's something Jennifer has presented through some of the early data for the board strategy. So for me, that feels like maybe some of the area we need to pick up and saying, can we do more collectively as partners to look at well-being that's related to preventing people getting back into work? Because I think a lot of it so far looks like skills development for work, and that's important. But if you're not able to work, then are we addressing that?
And that's a great point. Thank you, Gareth. Okay, and Kathy, please.
Thanks, Sarah. It's just to come back in on Alistair's point about our staff and their role in relation to supporting people and signposting people into support. So you're right, Sarah, we have the Money Counts courses that we deliver through public health, and we've certainly found that there's a real demand for those courses, more and more so since we've started promoting them with our staff, and we've done quite a bit of work, particularly within our maternity and child health services, to train as many staff as possible on money counts, and that gives people gives staff the knowledge and the confidence to ask about money worries within their interactions with people, and also provides them information on where to signpost onto, and that includes CAB. So we've also got, hand in hand with that, we've got the Worrying About Money app, which we signpost people to, and the Worrying About Money leaflet, which our staff have access to and can give out to patients in whatever circumstances they see them in. So that's work that's ongoing, and you'll see from the Highland Action Plan that we're looking to build on that and broaden out delivery of that training, and also within that look at further developing some of the work around pathways. So we have done quite a bit of work again with maternity services and health visitors, and developed an information trail that includes making sure that all pregnant women and women who've recently given birth have information about money worries, and signposting them to information to support them with that at different times throughout their pregnancy and after birth.
Okay, that all sounds really positive, Kathy. And I wonder if, again, perhaps in future iterations of this, we could maybe see if we can pull some of that together and sort of demonstrate how that, you know, the effect, the quantities that's been done by, or how in the uptake, or how effective that's been. I think that would be really helpful, because I think Alison made a really good point there about kind of how do we demonstrate, or well, how do we join the dots, and then how do we demonstrate that we've done that? And I think that's something that we should be thinking about, and we can perhaps pick that up in a future report. Mandy, I'll bring you in, please.
Yeah, actually, Kathy said a bit of what I was going to say anyway, but it is about training and picking the moment. I mean, we've been running an infant food insecurity pilot, and as part of that, we've produced a couple of leaflets that are for health visitors and midwives largely to use, and we've given training to in the use of that and that kind of benefits advice to new families, expectant families. So school nurses, family liaison officers, midwives, and health visitors. And that approach and that pilot of seems to have worked quite well.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so Jennifer, sorry, I'll bring you in.
Yeah, just a brief comment on some of what I've been hearing there, and I think what is really good to hear is about that recognition of the wider role. And I particularly like the framing that Alistair brought in to say, you know, there is more. We should be challenging ourselves to think, how can we do things differently? And I think picking up on Gareth's point there, you know, I think there's, when we look at these figures, we have got two functions through which we could be looking at this. One is, what is our role in relation to physical and mental health that has an impact? Because mental health in particular has a two-way relationship. Those who have enduring mental health conditions are more likely to be in debt, and persistent debt and poverty. Whereas also being in debt, having money worries, can lead to an impact clearly, and we would all recognise this in terms of our own mental health, which then makes working and functioning more, less tenable. And I guess then the other thing to also call out is, this isn't a them and us. This is also our staff. So we've almost got the two strands through which, as we start to work through our organisational strategy, you know, bringing these threads together of, so what is the art of the possible, and what more do we want to do, building on the work that's already happening in these partnerships. And I think I'd go back to the point of bringing in those with lived experience, because I think there's a danger that we will put things in place without fully understanding what more maybe we need to be doing in the way that we deliver, or that we're actually able to deliver. So yeah, just welcome the conversation that we've had today, and I think it's helpful as we start to consider our organisational strategy.
I agree, absolutely, Jennifer. Okay, good. So I'll just summarise. We were being asked to consider and note the actions carried out, consider and agree the actions going forward. And I would add to that we consider the suggestions and the points that we've just had in the conversation now, because there's been some really good ideas that have come through this conversation, so we can find an appropriate place to squeeze those things into. And we're being asked to note the activity undertaken and note the content of both the Highland and Argyll and Bute child poverty reports. Are we happy with that? Great. And I can't remember when this reports back, but offline we'll check when it reports back, because I think there's been some really good stuff here today. We don't want to lose that, particularly in relation to other work that's going on as we've described. So we'll make sure offline that that's in the right place in the work plan going forward. Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Kathy and Mandy as well for joining us. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to move us on now to the corporate risk register. So this is item number 10 on the agenda, and I'm going to invite David to speak to this item, please.
Yes, good afternoon. A bit of a change of pace from the last couple of topics, if I can, as we come to this one. This report is just presented for assurance and noting to the board. These risks that are identified will be familiar as they go through the subcommittees of the board and are considered in more detail at them. This just gives a reflection of what that collectively looks like. We have changed the formatting a little bit for this time around. Hopefully that's an easier summary for colleagues to read, and it will also help us track when changes occur and whether that be in scoring or updates. Now, recognising as corporate and board risk items, they're not likely to move from meeting to meeting. Some will, but it's not going to be as dynamic as that. Obviously, dynamic risk is much more at the operational levels that sit below this. But nonetheless, this is presented for noting and assurance today. Thanks.
Thank you, David. And always great. I think sometimes good to see things in a different format. Sometimes you can look at the same data, but when you change the presentation, it makes you see things you maybe didn't see before. So that was really good. Alec, I'll bring you in, please.
Yeah, no, that's fine, David. I like the format, like the trend bit. The bit that's missing, and I think it's still important to be in there because I know it's in there elsewhere, is that what are the mitigating actions that we're taking? Because at the moment, that's not in that table. It was before, but we can't see it. I know, as you said, you've changed the format slightly, but I think it's important that we actually see what the actions are supposed to be to reduce the risk over time. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. We will reflect on that in terms of reporting back for the next time around. And again, it was a combination of there's a level of detail obviously sits within the DATIC system. So we'll have a look at how we can summarise that in a way that would be meaningful. Thanks.
No, that'd be great, and we can bring that back and recognising we've just done a bit of a shift around risk. So it's going to be a little bit iterative. The one thing I just wanted to check, and sorry, while I'm talking, I'm trying to scroll and find the page that I saw it on. So I think actually the bit that I was really interested was on page 378 of the pack. So just that bit, and I know we've been talking about our risk management for a while and kind of where we might like to tweak and shore things up. So I think that page for me was really interesting on 378. And I just wanted to pick up the sort of the paragraph just before section 2.4. So it talks about the need for us to maybe come at this in a slightly different way, and to pick up the overall management of this in a different way. And that's great, that's welcome. It's not in the recommendation, so we're not approving that, but I suppose it was just to get a feel for, do we have a time frame around that? Do we what's the plan? What's the timeline around that refreshed approach? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I mean, I'd say it's early days in terms of the transfer from Boyd to myself also. Dominic has been helpful in this space as well. So there is a little bit of a reform in terms of the team that's looking for it, but I'm happy to take that ask away and be able to present that back at a future meeting.
Okay, that would be great. And I think, although I might regret saying this at this time, but I think we're probably also due a bit of time as a board around risk in a development space as well. We know we do it periodically. We've done appetite before, we've done other things, and I wonder if there'll be a point in that process, David, where maybe as a board we have a little bit of development time around it, just to be familiar with a new approach and what we're thinking there. Okay, Steve, I'll bring you in, please.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, David. David, it's a question. What score on the matrix on the risk register here triggers a formal management plan? And so I'm not sure which of these has a. Do they all of the risks here? Do they all have a formal management plan, and that sits in the background, but we're just not seeing it at this meeting?
Yeah, it's to the comment that Alex mentioned earlier. We are somewhat limited in the reporting function. It's very manual to be able to produce these reports at the moment, and that's given the limitations of our data system, which is being replaced. I'm hoping that the new system, the new national system we're going to be adopting, will give us a bit more scope to extract some of that information to make that presentable. But yes, most of our risks, I didn't say all, but I'm going to say most of the risks, the vast majority of risks, do have action plan and are quite substantive. So in some respects, that was one of the issues of the updates that we had before, was they were then quite verbose and you were getting into the detail of it. So we will work towards the sweet spot of being able to probably try and provide the right level of information at the subcommittees, where the subcommittees then would be reviewing and holding those risks, as well as what we present back to the board. So I dare say we might swing from one extreme to the other, but maybe that's what we did this time around. And hopefully, like every good Three Bears story, we'll get one that's in the middle.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. Okie dokie. Not seeing any other hands up around the risk register. So being asked to note those updates and take substantial assurance. Okay, great. Thank you, David. Right, that takes us on then to item number 11. So this is the update regarding the Argyll and Bute single authority model, and I would like to invite Gareth to speak to this item, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. So I'm going to take the paper as read, but I will pull out some key points for consideration. I recognise there's a lot of information in the paper. And there's a lot of background to this. We did have a board development session where we talked about the single authority model, and again the board was updated previously around discussions which will continue following this. And we have had, so the first point to raise is that the proposals that are included, the number of options there, the 5 options which were originally put forward by Argyll and Bute Council, were considered by the Joint Short Life Working Group, which met in September, beginning of September, and that was the first time we'd come together as 2 organisations to look at these in the round. It was a positive conversation, and we landed on recommending options 4 and 5, which will build on the current successes of integration, which is pulled out in the paper there. In relation to the successful work that's been done in Argyll and Bute with NHS Highland, and that's noted heavily in the paper. So I think some of the conversations we've had previously have been in relation to how can we enhance what we do, and do we actually need to make significant structural change at this stage to enhance further integration. So I think The other point to note was we were waiting on what was being referred to as parameters from Scottish Government, which were discussed back in March, and then did take some time to come from Scottish Government officials. And they were helpful in terms of laying out some of the accountability and legislative considerations that we need to make as a board around the future model of governance. And some of that has helped us look at some of the options to say at this stage in time, they do not appear to be compatible with the parameters going forward. So this has been a fairly high level options appraisal, the context of looking at what the benefits are, what the opportunities are in that, what the risks and challenges are, and how do they fit with the principles and parameters of what we're trying to achieve. And we've landed on these two options, fully empowered local board, which would build on the current integration model and extend potentially the functions that could be included in that, and the single authority partnership, which is a different governance model, which would essentially sit within one of the two organisations. Now, I think it's important to note there's going to be more conversation and dissection of what that option 5 particularly looks like, but also option 4 as well in terms of what's the art of the possible. There is some tension in relation to the expectations around timelines that are set out in the paper there, and going back to government at the end of September, which we're at now, to give them our preferred options. There's been much discussion around then having a detailed options by December, but I would say that the conversations are evolving each time we have the conversations with Scottish Government officials, and this will be an opportunity to explore their understanding and appetite for the timescales involved in terms of implementing change. I'll stop there because I could talk about it at length, but there's a lot of information in the paper.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Gareth. So yeah, as Gareth said, there's a lot of information in there, and some of us are obviously closer to it because we've been sitting around the table. We've been talking about it, but I think this is a really good opportunity for all board members to ask some questions and understand this, recognizing there's a lot in it, but yes, I'm really keen that we take the time to pull bits out today. Alex, bring you in first, please.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, very interesting paper. Bit surprised that one of the options that they've alighted on could require primary legislation change, because that's going to take a lot of time. Never mind anything else. But my actual question is, in terms of NHS Highland North and Highland Council, once this is done, or as it's moving forward, is this going to kind of tie us into, because it's in Argyll and Bute and it's worked that way, you're going to do this from the Scottish Government's perspective, or are we going to get a blank sheet of paper and work from that the other way around? Thanks.
Happy to try and answer that.
Yeah, go for it, Gareth. Yeah, that second question's tying my brains in knots a little bit, but yeah, go on, Gareth.
So I think the key point in relation to the board, and I think it's really important for us as a board because we cover two council areas, that we would seek to have a coherent governance model for both areas. And we will be seeking to represent your views through the Senior Officer Group, Joint Short Life Working Group, to work with Argyll and Bute to ensure there is coherence there for us. But obviously it's partnership working here in terms of then what is it we're trying to achieve, and what is it we do differently. But again, I think we have been cross-referencing each piece of work, the north piece of work in the south and the south vice versa, to say, what are we doing here? So I think the wider context piece here, which I think is positive, is that the conversations are less focused on structure per se, but thinking about public sector reform and what is it we want to do differently, and therefore what comes from that in terms of what levers do we need to pull. So it's a delicate balance of working with our partners to agree how we can achieve a coherent model without limiting our ambition as to place-based approaches. So it's a bit of a challenge, but hopefully we're not talking about the other work we're doing in North Highland today, but certainly I think that's been reflected in the conversations, that there is an emerging alignment between the two areas of work. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Gareth. And actually, I wonder if I might just broaden this out a little bit before we bring others in. So, of course, we're not the only area that's looking at this. It's also being considered in Orkney and in Western Isles. But we are unique in the sense that we are not entirely coterminous with the area that's being considered for it. And as Gareth has said, we have to make sure that as we move through this, we are confident that what we'll be left with, you know, regardless of what happens, what we'll be left with is a cohesive and highly functional organisation. But actually, some of the conversations I've been having with my counterparts in other boards is that it's not just that whatever remains is one cohesive organisation, but it has to be a cohesive system as well, because you start to take into account the balance between as you said, Gareth, you know, that local planning and local design for what will work in one location, but also balancing that with the some aspects of our services which are looked at on a national or subnational basis, and how will that all interact. I'm trying to explain it, but I'm worried I might maybe make it sound more complicated. But I think you're right. I think for us particularly, we have some thinking to do that the other two boards don't have to do in the same way, about what is the shape of our organisation at the end of this, and how does that function. Right, I'll stop rambling because I don't think I'm helping anymore. Right, Emily, I'll bring you in, please.
Thanks, Sarah. It was I think just building on Alex's question a bit. I don't want to labour the point, but I was just really looking for reassurance that there is some degree of kind of oversight of both discussions that are happening in Highland and in Argyll and Bute, so that we are not kind of developing two different ideas in isolation that then might not interact particularly well with each other. I know the paper does acknowledge that there's some kind of point of consideration in terms of what NHS Highland's future structure and governance looks like, but I think it is just really important that we don't that we have enough kind of discussions going on across the border, if you like, to make sure that it's coherent at the end of it. Because I guess if you look at that paper in isolation, you could end up with a situation where Highland's looking at various options, including an IJB, and Argyll might move away to an IJB to, according to these options, something akin to a lead agency model, and that just seems bonkers to me.
This is a conversation we've had lots of, yes. Gareth, I'll bring you in.
Yeah, so I think I'm for want of a better word, the linchpin that's sitting in the middle of both, because I'm on both groups. So I think that join up is absolutely critical. But again, I think how the board is involved in that and how we keep you updated is important as well, so that people feel. But yeah, give you some assurance that Fiona is very strongly through the middle of both sets of conversations. I am, and also. Yeah, so we'll do as much as we can. I think the other thing to reassure the board around is that the conversations we're having have been collegiate and productive in both forums, and I think that's something that's I suppose really worth emphasising, that the wider conversation is around collaboration, working together, good working relationships, and the evidence would demonstrate that it isn't necessarily just the model or the structure. It's how the relationships work. So I think that's why we're being very careful how we step through this, so that we maintain our relationships.
Absolutely. And I wonder if I might also just add in there. So I think to start with, it's helpful to recognise that there are different drivers. So whilst, yes, it feels kind of almost perversely bizarre that we're going through those two processes, one to move the North into an IJB from a lead agency, and potentially move the other way, you know, at the other side. It's like we're destined to never have the same model of integration in our board. But anyway, so yeah, absolutely. Fiona's been thinking that through, and in her conversations with colleagues in Scottish Government, laying out the importance of that cohesiveness. Likewise, I've been having conversations through the Chairs Network about that same thing, but and then how does that impact the whole system as well? So we've been making those representations, but yeah, those different drivers. So, you know, working in partnership with the Highland Council to come out of that lead agency it's got its own set of drivers around, you know, how effective that is and the outcomes. Whereas the single authority model conversation is, you know, we've got a policy driver there. We've been asked to do this by the ministers. So they come from two slightly different places. But I think what's been important and what will be important as we move through this and for the board to consider is, regardless of the drivers, they're both really good opportunities for us to consider outcomes, how we improve outcomes for our communities. And as Gareth said, almost the shape of it is yes, we need structures that support what we need to do, but it's about those relationships and that outcome focus and doing that in partnership, which is what we've been really working on maintaining. And the other bit for me is the evidence and the evidence that these changes will give us the outcomes that we want. And I guess that's the bit that we're at the moment with the single authority model, is that we have they've developed something called a kind of a theory of change, which talks about the desired impacts and outcomes that may be experienced as a result of doing this work. And as we move through the next detailed bit of options appraisal, I suppose what's important for me is that we understand the evidence behind that, so that we're making a kind of an informed decision, that we're not just hoping that it will deliver better outcomes, that we actually have an evidence base to support that. But I don't know, Gareth, have you got something to add to that? Because I've maybe not explained it in the clearest way.
No, I think the only thing I was going to add was there was a recent meeting for all those involved from the different those three areas, geographical areas, looking at the theory of change. And I think what was really interesting about that was, I think it would have been helpful to have had that some months ago. There was a lot of discussion around reshaping how it was expressed. So I think the reason I mention that is that it's an evolving picture. So and I think that is in contrast to the timelines that are in the paper. So in some respects, we're saying it will be better to make sure we take time to do this properly and explore it properly. So I expect these things to evolve even further. And my experience to date has been very much that the time and effort that's required to do that is quite significant when you've got partners involved, and there may be sensitivities in terms of, you know, for example, picking up on you know, the what looks like a lead agency creating certain perspectives of it from our perspective. And I suppose it's understanding what's behind all of that. There's a lot of nuance in this around what those models might look like, and I suppose managing anxieties that might be circulating as a result of that, of experiences. So that's one of the things that has been part of our conversation is we've got to balance as a board our experiences of one model of integration in the north and then another model of integration in the south, and making sure that it doesn't end up sort of being an anchor that holds us back from thinking about doing things differently. So it's really hard to articulate, but essentially they're very interesting conversations. I think they're going to continue for some period of time as we start to tease out exactly what those options 4 and 5, but at least the positives are we've got down to 2 out of 5 now, as opposed to having the full suite on the table, because there's definitely options on the table that I think we would find difficult to support as a board.
Yeah, absolutely. Karen, Evan, did you want to come in on that particular bit?
It was more, I kind of just in relation to some of the points in the kind of focus of the discussion. I want to recognize the kind of the potential implications for the model of integration in North Highland here, but just also kind of reflect that this is specifically a paper about the model of integration in Argyll and Bute, and the focus is really about how do we deliver that integrated function for the NHS, the Argyll and Bute part of NHS Highland, in the best possible way for the best possible outcomes for Argyll and Bute, and I suppose ultimately to deliver on those health and wellbeing indicators that we're tasked with delivering. So maybe I can kind of answer the question around the potential for an implication on the lead agency model in another way, which is that the tenor of those discussions around the SAM within Argyll and Bute are very much focused on how do we drive integration, how do we get the best of the people of Argyll and Bute, of which you would expect that lessons learned around different models of integration and kind of movements in a different way, certainly within NHS Highland, but also kind of nationally, are of course part of that discussion. So it would seem obtuse for us to go in a different direction, but we may come up with a different answer compared to the north bit of NHS Highland, but that should be driven by lessons learned, knowledge gained, and the understanding of how we deliver integrated services within Argyll and Bute.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Evan. Okay, Karen, sorry, I'll bring you in now.
Thank you. I'm a glass half full kind of person, and so I do optimistic, I think, that this is a good thing to be doing. And there's in amongst all the change that's going on across all systems, and we're all involved, and everyone's involved in change of some way or another. But I think my word of caution to myself is what actually will be in our gift once all of these lovely meetings and decisions and workshops and conversations have been had. What actually will we, if this SAM in whatever format is agreed goes ahead, where will we get the delegated authority from the government to make that fully integrated decision making that we all kind of know we would like to do differently with our partners, and where we'll still sit at that national level, so we don't get that opportunity to influence local change in a meaningful way. I'm choosing my words carefully, because I think that is the bit that is exciting, that we've got that, fully integrated partnership conversations. We've had some great papers today that have it showed us when that works well, how well it can work, and it's about something for me about courage and confidence. So the courage and confidence in ourselves, but also that we gain that courage and confidence from the people in our communities and our staff and our neighbours and whoever, but also that the Scottish Government has courage and confidence that as local people living in local communities, we actually have the ability to make some of these decisions at a more local level if they would just let go the reins a wee bit. So I suppose that's what I'm thinking. My ambitions are taking me in that way, in my glass half full. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Gareth, I don't know if you can pick that up. I mean, I think some of that is, I suppose, what the next set of discussions are going to be about, but I don't know, Gareth, if you want to pick that up.
I'm not sure I'm well placed to be able to respond on behalf of Scottish Government, but I think it's a valid point, and I think the criticality here is it's about balance, isn't it? And one of the things that's coming out very strongly around this is that tension between what makes sense for us to deliver at a national level, regional level, local level, and that is something that I think you then hold in that space. I think probably one of the things I would probably reflect Fiona would say is that certainly I've heard her say, so I'll say it that way rather than that she would say it now, is that if we are as a board going to develop our board strategy, then we can be proactive in our space to say what we think suits us, we will never necessarily get away from policy drive and directives that are a strongly embedded part of the NHS legislation. It's a very strong part of the accountability structures. The parameters quite clearly set out some of those sort of, if you like, described as red lines at one point, but then referred to as parameters. So I think that gives you an indication that there's still that tension between central government and local government that's going to have to play out. But what we need to do is play well as partners in that space and be honest brokers, probably the best way of putting it.
Agree with that description, Gareth. Okay. Jerry, I'll bring you in, please.
Thank you, Sarah. Probably a lot of what I was going to say has already been said, but a few key things for me. I think what will be key for me when we get to a point of having something to actively consider in a decision-making framework will be that what can demonstrably demonstrate a positive movement in the expected outcomes for the population. So that to me is absolutely key, rather than all the governance and democratically enabled and what about health and care outcomes, and we're going to have to see that. I think leading into that then, and the point I was actually going to make first of all was about timelines. I think we have to be very careful about timelines, because I think it talks about, or I think Scottish Government spoke about December time having a preferred model. Not a chance. And I think we have to be absolutely clear about that. There is just absolutely no possibility that all the issues that we've spoken about briefly in the last 20 minutes could possibly be resolved to the satisfaction of the board, I would have thought, in the next 6 weeks for a paper to be brought here. Because there's actually a few timelines, isn't there? There's a timeline for agreeing a model between the partners. There's an effective date for that model, and then there's an implementation of that model and everything that goes along with that. So I think the timescale could be quite vast here. But one of the ones I did want to pick up here is I think we have to be very careful on the terminology. And I'm looking at page 334 of the pack when it talks about preferred options. I would strongly argue that we do not have anywhere near a preferred option at the moment. What we have is options 1, 2, and 3, so we will not consider any further. 4 and 5 we will now do the work on, but we do not have a preferred model. It's not option 4 or option 5. It might be neither.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jerry.
It may well be neither, because there is just too much once we work through the level of detail that's required in there. Because I think a really good point that Gareth made was that coherent model of governance across the entirety of NHS Highland is essential. And we have to work that in. So if this delivers improved outcomes for the population of Argyll and Bute, and something else for the north of Highland, it delivers improved outcomes for the population of North Highland, I will show me where to sign, and I will sign it. But I think we've got a long journey to go before we can actually get to that, because exactly as you said, Sarah, we can't do this in hope that it delivers an improvement. We've got to actually say this is what it should deliver. If we implement it well, this is what it should deliver. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to pick up on the timeline. So we have, I think, taken every opportunity to point out to Scottish Government that these timelines are ambitious, would be a gentle way of putting it. So that has and continues to be communicated every opportunity that we have. I really like your point, Jerry, though, about that preferred model, and there's yeah, maybe we think about actually when we're presenting, we have a meeting coming up next month, I think, and maybe there is something about the language that we use. I think it's a great point. Gareth, I'll bring you in as well.
Yeah, and I probably want to take us back to some comments that were made I think the last time the board we discussed this. the work that's required to demonstrate this will make a difference and have a positive outcome is still really needing to be done. Because I would agree that at the moment this is, I suppose, looking at reasons why you wouldn't be able to take certain models forwards, not necessarily demonstrating that the models that are left are going to have a positive outcome. So I think reflecting where we've got to with conversations in the north, we can take lessons from that, where we're really looking at, okay, so we need an evidential base to be able to say what change we want to make away from where we are currently, stacks up and could be defendable and auditable. And I think, coming back to points people made, that includes staff engagement, community engagement, have to run through this. We need to be able to demonstrate that actually this isn't just a hope it's going to make a difference. It has to be demonstrable that it's going to make a difference, or we have a reasonable degree of confidence that there's enough evidence, qualitative and quantitative, to indicate we should go in that direction. But I think the tension will continue to play out with timelines, but I don't think we should be too averse to continuing to push that and say that I think we have the opportunity to say, and the way of doing that, say we've got to do this right, not quickly. And in that context, not quite how I would say it in the meetings that we're going into. But I think it's that thoroughness, and I think that's the things we can bring into it, saying this is what we're learning from the North Highland pieces, to be able to demonstrate this to our communities and have a really good evidential base. We have realised we've got more work to do. So that's the advantage in some respects of doing both things at the same time, because it allows us to be able to cross-reference, and we're uniquely placed as one of the board that's got two areas to refer. So there's some real, come back to Karen's point, there's a real glass half full stuff here, that actually we're not just, we're across two areas and can bring that learning from each area into each conversation.
Yeah, I think that's right, Gareth. I just, as a side point, I think there has been increased recognition around the table that we have that learning to bring, and that is a valuable input into the process, which is positive. Okay, so I'm just going to recap. We're being asked to note the ongoing collaborative work and take substantial assurance from that, accept the recommended views of the Short Life Working Group regarding options 4 and 5 being the models to take forward for further investigation, maybe, as opposed to preferred models, and agree that the authority is delegated to the Chief Executive and Executive Director with responsibility, etc., etc. So are we all okay with that? And we could just tweak that wording, I think, for that second bullet point. I think it's good thing to do. Great. Lovely, thank you. And Gareth, to you again for the Q1 whistleblowing report, please.
Thanks. So just to note, this has gone through staff governance for discussion, and it comes to the board as it's a board requirement to publish a quarterly report. I shall take any questions.
Thank you, Gareth. Yep. And obviously we've got a good update from Philip earlier regarding the discussion that was had at staff governance and the elements around the whistleblowing report there that were discussed at that committee, but happy if there are any questions or comments. No, okay, we're being asked to note and take moderate assurance from the Q1 whistleblowing report. Are we okay with that? Lovely. And on to any other competent business. I'll pause for a moment in case anyone's got anything they want to raise. Gareth?
It's just to note, we've the Health and Care Staffing Act Q1 report has not progressed through to board, so I was going to seek permission to circulate it because it will need to be submitted to Healthcare Improvement Scotland, but we can maybe pick it up at next board meeting formally. But it's just, we'll circulate it in the short term.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's fine with me. Yes, we can do that. That seems fine. Okay. And the only other thing was an update regarding our annual review. Nathan, can I bring you in to share the details?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Sarah. So this year's annual review will take place at the McDonald Abbeymoor Resort in Aviemore on the 18th of November. The public session will start at about 2 p.m. So we're just sorting out the finer details there as well. It's just to encourage members of the public to join if they wish to do so. We have set up a process for people to highlight if they're interested in joining, and that'll be sent out via social media and other comms as well for members of the public. And I've obviously reached out to board members and execs around attendance and things too, and some visits hopefully in the morning as well in the local area. But happy to answer any questions if anyone has any at all. So.
And people can, if members of the public want to be a part of that, but they can't actually attend, there's a way that they can submit questions ahead of time, isn't there?
That's right, yeah. So on our engagement hub, we've also got an area for people to submit questions as well, if they can't attend. And we'll also be publishing any questions and answers as well after the event too, so people can read that online.
That's great. Thank you, Nathan. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up, so we'll just note the date and time of the next public board meeting is on the 25th of November. And to thank you all for your time today. I realise we went beyond what the agenda had suggested, but I think we've had some really important discussions today, so I don't feel too bad. Thanks everybody for your time, and I hope you have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.